We're looking at Chapter 3 of our text, Interpersonal Communication and the Self. We looked at Chapter 1, Communication and the Self Concept. Segment 1, forgive me. Segment 2 is Presenting the Self. And Segment 3 is Disclosing the Self. So what we choose to disclose about ourselves is an important component of impression management. So what constitutes self-disclosure then? You might say that every time you open your mouth, you're telling people something about yourself, and that is certainly true, but self-disclosure is defined a little bit more tightly. If it's going to be constituted as self-disclosure, it must contain some personal information about you. The sender must communicate that information verbally. Another person must be the target. So there are three basic ways. So put it differently, the subject of self-disclosing communication is the self. 2, it's about the self, and information about the self is purposefully communicated to another person. Some of the self-disclosure factors include honesty, and the saying is true that self-disclosure certainly has to be honest and accurate to the best of your knowledge. If you paint an incomplete picture of yourself, it certainly is not a genuine definition of self-disclosure. It's not real self-disclosure. Not only must there be honesty, there must be depth rather than surface information. There's some things I can tell about yourself very quickly. By just looking at you, you don't have to disclose that. And I can disclose some surface level information about myself that's really not considered self-disclosure. So there must be depth. It must be personal and intimate for it to constitute self-disclosure. That information must not be easily available. So availability of information is the third aspect of self-disclosure in terms of defining it. So you should not be able to find that information easily by Googling it and looking for it on the web per se. It must be something that's a lot more difficult to find out. And sometimes an act of self-disclosure is defined more in terms of the context in which it is being shared. So you may share something about yourself, and it may not constitute self-disclosure between you and a personal friend. But if you are sharing that same information in the context of a class where most students don't know each other, then it might constitute self-disclosure. So summarize self-disclosure by saying that it has the self as the subject, it is intentional, it is directed at another person, it is honest, it is revealing, it contains information that's generally not available from other sources, and gains much of its intimate nature from the context in which it is expressed. The textbook refers to two models of self-disclosure. Let's look at those two. The first one is the social penetration model, theorized by Taylor and Altman in 1987. And the second one is the Johari window. Let's look at the first one, the social penetration model. This model describes relationships in terms of breadth and depth of disclosure. So if you look at the graphic in the textbook, you'll see that you can share information with someone else on a number of topics. So that's breadth. But if you hone in one of those topics and share more intimate information, that refers to the depth of your self-disclosure. So you've got the breadth of information that's volunteered, the range of subjects, the depth is the amount of disclosure being volunteered, and moving from impersonal messages to something that's far more personal. So depending on the breadth and depth of the information shared, a relationship can be defined as either casual or intimate. In a casual relationship, the breadth may be great, but not the depth. A more intimate relationship is likely to have high depth in at least one area. The most intimate of relationships has both high breadth and depth. So Altman and Taylor see the development of a relationship as a process, as a progression from the outside, from the periphery of their model to its center. And of course, this will take time, and that time varies by the relationship. So if each of your interpersonal relationships has a different permutation about it, shape about it, in terms of the breadth of subjects that are involved and the depth of that revelation. So one way to classify the depth of disclosure is to look at the types of information that can be shared. Cliches are ritualized stock responses to social situations. How are you doing? Fine. Really not much information that is being shared. Another kind of messaging involves communicating facts. Not all factual statements qualify as self-disclosure. In order to qualify, it must meet the criteria of being intentional, significant, and not otherwise known. Opinions can be a kind of self-disclosure because they often reveal more about a person than facts alone. So opinions. And then the fourth one, probably the most revealing, involves the expression of your feelings, how you feel about something. I'm suspicious, I'm angry, I'm hurt in relationship to someone. The second model, so Altman and Taylor, the social penetration model. The second model is the Johari window, developed by Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham, and it pertains to your awareness of self-disclosure. So if you look at the model, imagine a frame that contains everything there is to know about you, your likes, your goals, your secrets, your needs, everything that is known about you. This frame could be divided into information you know about yourself and things that you don't know. And it could also be split into things others know about you and things they don't know. So there are 4 quadrants to the model, the Johari window. Part 1 represents the information that you know about yourself and others know about you as well. This is your open area. And depending on the relationship you have with that person, it might be small, it might be large. So it's what you know and it's what others know. It's not just what you know. Remember that. It's what you know and what you reveal to others as well. Part 2 represents the blind area. Information of which you are aware of, but the other person, information of which you are unaware, and the other person is aware. So that blind area is some of the quirky things that you do that other people see that you may not be aware of. You learn about the things that you do that are the things that are in this blind area through feedback. So the open window becomes larger through self-disclosure. The blind window becomes larger through feedback as you listen to what people tell you about yourself. The third quadrant is the hidden area. This is information that you know about yourself, but you aren't willing to share with others. Items in this hidden area become public primarily through self-disclosure. So items in the hidden area would go to the open area by self-disclosure. And then part 4 of the Johari window represents information that is unknown both to you and to the people around you. We can deduce its existence because we're constantly discovering new things about ourselves. So the relative size of each area in our personal Johari window changes from time to time according to a number of things. 1 is our moods, 2 the subject that we are discussing, and 3 the relationship that we have with that other person. So what are the benefits and risks of self-disclosure? Self-disclosure certainly is key to relational development. If you want to grow closer to someone else, you have to share information about yourself. On the other hand, revealing deeply personal information about you can threaten your stability, personally, and even the survival of a relationship, the stability of a relationship itself. And so we use the term privacy management to describe the choices people make to reveal or to conceal information about themselves. Let's look at the benefits of self-disclosure first, and then the risks of self-disclosure. First benefit is catharsis. And you've probably experienced this, where just the act of sharing what you're going through with someone else relieves you the burden of pent-up emotions. But when it's the only goal of self-disclosure, then the results may not always be good. But you need people around you where you can vent. The second one is self-clarification. Very often in the act of sharing your ideas with somebody else, it actually clarifies what you really think and your opinions and your beliefs about that. So it helps that they become a sounding board and they provide critical interaction as well. Self-validation is the third. So if you disclose information with the hope of seeking some affirmation, some agreement from the listener, you're looking for validation, confirmation about a belief about yourself, that you hold about yourself. And certainly this is important. The fourth one is reciprocity. Again, here, there's no guarantee that if you self-disclose, the other person will self-disclose as well. It will not necessarily trigger self-disclosure by others. But your own honesty and transparency can create a climate that makes the other person feel safer, sometimes even obligated to match your level of honesty and candor and transparency. Impression formation. Sometimes we reveal information to make ourselves more attractive. And research shows that this strategy seems to work. Relationship maintenance and enhancement. The relationship between self-disclosure and liking works in several directions. First, we like people who disclose personal information to us. We reveal more about ourselves to people we like, and we tend to like others more after we have disclosed to them. Interesting. Moral obligation. Sometimes we disclose personal information out of a sense of moral obligation. That person needs to know for whatever reason that might be. The risks of self-disclosure fall into several categories. One is rejection. I'm afraid to tell you who I am because if I tell you who I am, you may not like who I am, and that's all that I have. Negative impression. It might not lead to total rejection in a relationship, but it can create a negative impression when you share information. It might involve a decrease in relational satisfaction. It might involve a loss of influence in that relationship. If you confess a secret weakness, the other person might try to control you. It might involve loss of control. What might happen if the person tells others what you've disclosed, people you prefer not to know, of whom you would like to tell yourself? And hurting the other person. Even if revealing information leaves you feeling better, it might hurt the other person that you are revealing to. You saying something like, I hate you, I've never loved you, or you certainly will hurt the other person. Here's some guidelines for self-disclosure. Is the other person important to you? Is there an opportunity for you to grow closer by self-disclosing? Is the risk of disclosing reasonable? So calculate the potential for harm versus the potential for good in disclosing. Is the self-disclosure appropriate? Are you sharing too much information too soon? There's a time and place for engaging in and refraining from self-disclosure. Is the self-disclosure reciprocated? If you have unequal self-disclosure, it creates an imbalance or an unbalanced relationship, one with potential for problems. And will the effect be constructive? So self-disclosure can be a vicious tool if not used carefully. And sometimes you can disclose something that might hit somebody below the belt line. Some alternatives to self-disclosure include silence, and that is just to keep quiet. Keep your thoughts and feelings to yourself. Withholding information in the workplace is seen as a better alternative than lying or engaging in deception. Lying, two types of lie. It might be a benevolent lie versus a malicious lie. Benevolent lies are defined, at least by the people who tell them, as not being malicious. Well, they may be innocent, but they may create potential. They may create the potential for major problems and issues. Not all lies are equally devastating. Lying about major parts of your relationship can have the gravest of consequences. So if preserving a relationship is important to you, honesty is the best policy. Equivocation is an alternative to blatant truth-telling or lying, something in between, statements that are not literally false but cleverly avoid an unpleasant truth. Your response is vague. Most people will choose to equivocate rather than tell a blatant lie. And some forms of equivocation rely on telling partial truths. Hinting is more direct than equivocal statements. So you may hint at something. The success of a hint depends on the other person's ability to pick up that unexpressed message. So what are the effects of evasion? Successful liars, equivocators, and hinters can be said to possess a certain kind of communication competence, true. On the other hand, there are times when honesty is the right approach, even if it's painful. At times, these evaders could be viewed as lacking either the competence or the integrity to handle a situation effectively. Another approach is to consider whether the effects of a lie will be worth the deception. Are you doing good by lying? Are you avoiding harm by lying? Are you protecting a larger truth? The right question to ask maybe then is whether an indirect message is truly in the interest of the receiver and whether this sort of evasion is the only effective way to behave. Imagine how others would respond if they knew what you were really thinking or feeling. Would you accept your reasons for not disclosing?